Hey, this is Anney.
And Samantha.
And welcome to Stuff We Never Told You, a production of iHeartRadio.
And welcome to another edition of Monday Mini. Quick content warning, we are talking about pornography, sexual harassment, and stalking, and exploitation, and all of the gross stuff. I'm not necessarily going to get into specifics. I am going to talk about certain incidents and what's happening around the world. So, yeah, there you go. And in the world of this is why we can't have anything nice, we're talking about AI again. So we've had several episodes about the world of AI and how it's recently grown rapidly with all the talks about the advantages and disadvantages, including some of the backlash. We talked with Bridget about, who also talks a lot about it on her show, There Are No Girls on the Internet. And yeah, just overall the usage of AI has grown with that continued backlash and concern. So recently in South Korea, I think my feed has a lot of South Korean information, but hey, a major incident occurred where it was discovered hundreds of men and boys were using AI to create deepfakes in order to harass or blackmail women. So here's a bit more from the BBC. Authorities, journalists, and social media users recently identified a large number of chat groups where members were creating and sharing sexually explicit deepfake images, including some of underage girls. Deepfakes are generated using artificial intelligence and often combine the face of a real person with a fake body. And it continues, the spate of chat groups linked to individual schools and universities across the country were discovered on the social media app Telegram over the past week. Users, mainly teenage students, would upload photos of people they knew, both classmates and teachers, and other users would then turn them into sexually explicit deepfake images. The discoveries followed the arrest of the Russian-born founder of Telegram, Pavel Durov, on Saturday after it was alleged that child pornography, drug trafficking, and fraud were taking place on the encrypted messaging app. And this is from The Guardian with a little more detail. Police will, quote, aggressively pursue people who make and spread the material in a 7-month campaign due to start on Wednesday, the Yonhap news agency said, with a focus on those who exploit children and teenagers. After a long struggle to stamp out Molka, secretly filmed material of a sexual nature, South Korea is now battling a wave of deepfake images. Deepfake videos targeting unspecified individuals who've been rapidly spreading through social media, President Yoon told a cabinet meeting, according to his office. Many victims are minors, and most perpetrators have also been identified as teenagers. He called on authorities to, quote, thoroughly investigate and address these digital sex crimes to eradicate them. According to the country's police agency, 297 cases of deepfake crimes of a sexual nature were reported in the first 7 months of the year, up from the 180 last year and nearly double the number in 2021, when data first began to be collated. Of the 178 people charged, 113 were teenagers. But the problem is believed to be more serious than the official figures suggest. One Telegram chat room has attracted about 220,000 members who create and share deepfakes, images by doctoring photographs of women and girls. South Korean media said the victims include university students, teachers, and military personnel. So on one analysis about South Korea's Hankyoreh newspaper, the highlighted Telegram channels itself were being used to share deepfakes of female students and high school and middle school students. The Korean Teachers and Education Workers Union said it had learned of sexual deepfakes involving school students and had asked the Education Ministry to investigate. The investigation into sexually explicit deepfake images is expected to inflict further damage on Telegram's reputation in South Korea, where the app was used to operate an online sexual blackmail ring, which was a whole different conversation that was super gross and super disgusting and nobody being punished hardly. So as this incident just recently came to light, it isn't anything new, and it sounds like they have been investigating it. It took them a very long time to get to this point. In fact, South Korea is saying that the incidents like this have created a need to declare a national emergency. It hasn't yet, though. In South Korea alone, these deepfake sex crimes, as they are called, have only increased. It's interesting because it says teenagers were responsible for a main amount of these offenses. So there's a lot to be said. They have talked about how there were men using their wives' pictures as well, so that there was enough that they found that happening, which is odd. I'm like, I've just been recently hearing more and more stories of their own husbands doing this to their wives, but then also taking videos, explicit videos after their wives are asleep. I don't know why this is popping up on my stuff, which is really concerning. I'm wondering how often this happens and it's just being talked about now and being found out about. And again, though this incident is specifically talking about South Korea, it's a bigger issue. We know this all around the world. In fact, as I was researching, I was trying to get some statistics. The first site that popped up was a site completely dedicated on deepfakes of celebrity porn videos. That was my first. And like they was advertising like a Pornhub saying, look, we have all of these. Come and find your video. Come and find your celebrity you want to watch. And also how to find deepfakes online, like showing all the taglines and where to find these taglines. So those were the first that popped up. So yeah, I f***ed up my algorithm for y'all. I'm just kidding. Anyway, please, if you're listening to this, police people, I'm not trying to find it. I was researching. I'm only
Who are
researching.
you speaking to?
To those surveilling me. You know they're there.
Okay.
Ben Bolin would have known what I'm talking about.
Oh yeah, you're right. Sorry.
There's so much that we need to talk about. For example, there are incidents here that happen in the U.S. that I just haven't seen. It hasn't popped up on my feed, which is really unfortunate, including a student creating a deepfake porn of other students at a New Jersey high school, and another incident in a Beverly Hills middle school. And I am very, very disturbed by both of these things, obviously. But the fact that we're not talking about it, the fact that there's not really being much done or handled here. And by the way, as I was writing this one, the word deepfake kept being caught on my word check, spell check.
Oh yeah.
And I'm like having to add this to my dictionary. And I'm like, wow, Google's not even up on the fact. Even though they have a whole AI company that's not doing well, apparently. I don't know. The Beverly Hills Unified School District says it's working with the Beverly Hills Police Department in investigating this incident. And those responsible will face disciplinary action. A mother of one of the students at the schools that many girls were targeted by the deepfake pornographic images. And she goes on to say her daughter was not one of the victims. She still feels victimized knowing that this is her friend. And of course, the school came out with a statement saying they would thoroughly punish. This is a form of bullying, and we understand this. This is not going to be tolerated in the schools. And if other people have been involved or you find images or know that someone has those images, please let us know. So all those things are happening. However, again, there are no real stated laws about this. We know that it's difficult to go after people for bullying online, which we can show that is bullying. We know it's difficult to go after people for revenge porn, where they're tape that they had been they didn't know they were being made, or they did know but it was only consented for personal use, and then they use that against them or to blackmail people again. And there's no real law stopping this. Like, there's laws that you can try to interpret, but that's a really sleazy game to play for someone who's been a victim of this. And again, if you're an up-to-date listener, you may remember us talking about the Taylor Swift deepfake that caused a flurry of conversation earlier this year, and how that did initially push lawmakers to taking a deeper look and present a bill to make a law allowing for victims to sue the people who have created these deepfakes under some circumstances. As reported by Time magazine, they say, the Disrupt Explicit Forged Images and Non-Consensual Edits, or the Defiance Act, allows victims to sue if those who created the deepfakes knew or recklessly disregarded that the victim did not consent to its making. But the reality is there's no federal law making this illegal at all. And even with this law, it's very limiting. And honestly, I'm assuming only rich people, people with some type of income, are going to be able to take advantage of this type of law and legislation. Which again, what? Mm-hmm. That whole take is they're allowed to sue if it's recklessly disregarding. That's almost like an excuse.
I know. It's like I wasn't allowed to sue before. I feel like I should have already had that right to sue. And all they did was a mistake. It sounds like the way they're saying is that the person who created this just made a mistake. It was just reckless. A little bit reckless. Yeah. It is interesting because our laws are so behind on a lot of technology things, but as you've probably heard, listeners, also related to Taylor Swift, Donald Trump released some AI images of her, and they're trying to figure out how to deal with that because there is a law that says you can't do that, but it's like not for technology.
Right.
So we're just behind. We're just behind.
Everybody's behind.
Yeah.
Everybody's behind. I mean, the fact that South Korea does have a digital sex crime unit, that's great. But it also was because there was been so many complaints of women being like, hey, I'm being illegally taped.
Yeah.
And they still really don't stop that. And it's only like a fine.
Right. And we've talked about this, like, I believe we talked about it in that episode with Bridget about this kind of thing, is that it is largely women that this is impacting. And I think that points to a larger issue, like a systemic societal issue. But the fact is, it is impacting more women. And it's, once again, another instance where it seems like a lot of the perhaps men in power are sort of like, oh, well, that's the price of being online as a woman, or that's just the price of existing as a woman. It doesn't impact me.
Right.
So it's not a priority.
I will say the one thing that might happen now, because the Lincoln Project apparently released an ad, which I'm very surprised by, of an AI image of Donald Trump crying. So I have a feeling Donald Trump's going to be pissed about that and his campaign. So they're going to try to do something now that that's been released. But again, and this is where I felt icky and like, I will say from jump, I know nothing about the Lincoln Project. And from what I understand, they are very capitalistic opportunists that doesn't like Donald Trump. So I don't know what that means. I don't believe that I think if I look deeper into it, and I know enough that I don't agree with what they're doing completely. Like I think some of the things could be funny, but at the same time, I'm like, you are not my cup of tea. I have a feeling we are on opposing sides still type of conversation. So put that as a caveat. And with that, like, I don't like AI images anyway, and I feel like it should just be done with. Like, there's no need for any of this. Unless you're making me a cute image of a raccoon or a squid with a hat or an octopus with a hat or a cute mini animal that I'm like, I wish this existed, I don't understand.
Have I told you about sea urchins?
Yes, you have. You have not sent me any pictures, Anney.
Oh, I'll do it immediately after
or
this.
real. So I'm still waiting. I've watched the clip with the octopus bargaining. We've talked about this so many times. I love that this is part of our conversation, even about deepfakes. But yeah, I like either way, it's still kind of concerning. But as a reminder, here's some more information from Time about deepfakes. Non-consensual pornographic deepfakes are alarmingly easy to access and create. Starting at the very top, there's a search engine where you can search, how do I make a deepfake? Then they will give you a bunch of links. Carrie Goldberg, an attorney who represents tech abuse victims, previously told Time. Deepfake software takes a person's photos and face swaps them onto pornographic videos, making it appear as if the subject is partaking in sexual acts. And a 2019 study found that 96% of all deepfake videos were non-consensual pornography. 96%.
Yeah.
I can't imagine. The numbers got to be, well, I guess the percentage may not change because the percentage works that way, but the actual numbers, I bet, are huge. Yeah. And yeah, there's currently no law or legislation to regulate deep fakes federally, but there is an act to research it. So here's some information from ThomsonReuters.com. Currently, there's no comprehensive enacted federal legislation in the United States that bans or even regulates deep fakes. However, the Identifying Outputs of Generative Adversarial Networks Act requires the director of the National Science Foundation to support research for the development and measurements of standards needed to generate GAN outputs and any other comparable techniques developed in the future. Real talk, I don't know what that's telling me other than they're just researching. Am I wrong?
They're saying that they're going to make... Yeah, they're going to support research for maybe coming up with standards
maybe
later.
They don't
This is what
anything.
They do with what they used to do before it got outlawed with gun violence all the time. They're like, well, we'll look into it. And then they never.
So we're just on the same route as being the gun regulations. Great.
That's what it sounds like.
And back to that possible federal legislation we mentioned earlier, Thomson Reuters writes, Congress is considering additional legislation that, if passed, would regulate the creation, disclosure, and dissemination of deepfakes. Some of the legislation includes the Deepfake Report Act of 2019, which requires the Science and Technology Directorate in the U.S. Department of Homeland Security to report at specified intervals on the state of digital content forgery technology. The Deepfakes Accountability Act, which aims to protect national security against the threats posed by deepfake technology and to provide legal recourse to victims of harmful deepfakes. The Defiance Act of 2024, which would improve rights to relief for individuals affected by non-consensual activities involving intimate digital forgeries and for other purposes. And the Protecting Consumers from Deceptive AI Act, which requires the National Institute of Standards and Technology to establish a task force to facilitate and inform the development of technical standards and guidelines relating to the identifications of content created by Gen AI to ensure the audio or visual content created or substantially modified by Gen AI includes a disclosure acknowledging that Gen AI origin of such content and for other purposes. So specifically, we're talking about 4 different acts that could help possibly regulate. Now, this again comes with the fact that we know that standards of regulation, the Supreme Court said, is no longer necessary in the U.S. essentially, and they don't have to regulate anything, so that's a little concerning. So just that as a reminder. Also, this is 4 different ways of looking at it. It really doesn't seem like it's helping victims as well as it's punishing companies, but not even that hard.
Right, and we've seen that a million times too, of like a company paying a fine that for them is a drop in the bucket. It might to us who don't have millions of dollars, if not billions, look like, oh my God. But to them, that's like nothing. And then they get to continue doing what they're doing.
Right.
And probably making money off of the fact, covering for that fine,
right,
that they get to continue what they're doing.
Yeah, it makes more sense and money just to pay the fine and continue on. Yeah. Like they're making so much. Again, and then Protecting the Consumers from Deceptive AI Act. I really have a feeling this is going to go along the lines of the standards of like, oh, let's put an FDA level of this so we can protect people's health. Nah, we don't need it. They're smart. If not, oh well, they'll get over it.
Yeah. I bet there's going to be some arguments about, I know there already have been, but I bet there's going to be continued arguments about like freedom of speech and this is like infringing on freedom of speech.
And there's so many conversations. And then even when you start like going down the slippery slope of like, but it's not really harming these people. We're not actually touching these people. Isn't it better that we do this and actually go kidnap somebody? I mean, that is absolutely a conversation.
Yeah.
I remember an SVU episode, and this kind of reminds me of this, in which they are shooting porn. And they get a report saying that she's a 15-year-old having to shoot porn. And so they go and bust it down. It turns out she was actually 19. And they just use, they didn't say AI, they said Photoshop, which is essentially the same thing. They use Photoshop to de-age her. And they're like, look at this technology. It's going to save so many children. And you're like,
oh, no.
That's not what's happening. And the debate wasn't that SVU wasn't trying to, Law and Order SVU, y'all. If you know, you know. Mariska Hargitay, I love you.
Yes.
But like they weren't arguing for either. They were like, and then the bigger debate about what is going to happen with the children and the porn industry and child abuse and all of this. And by the way, also, as big as that conversation about save the children, this is not being mentioned much.
Yeah.
This is not being mentioned much. Like I'm really wondering the level of like, is anybody taking this seriously? Why are you not taking this seriously? Literally, they were using this type of technology in South Korea to blackmail women into sexual coercion. Like they were using this to be like, if you don't do this with me, I'm going to release this and shame you. And I will say this is in South Korea. In South Korea, it's like, no, they're going to go after the women. They are more than they are going to go after the perpetrators, no matter what, just for the sake of. the victim blaming is heavy. And it's not just in South Korea. Just existing.
Mm-hmm.
Like, people saying you put her on the internet, what did you expect? You have a picture on the internet, what did you expect? That level of conversation is so disheartening, but it's too real. It's just real. And the fact that they are not caring enough, that all they can do is, we'll give you the power to sue. How about that? How about that? And you may or may not win, because you have to prove that it was a reckless disregard of your safety.
Yeah.
What does that even mean?
I mean, I can already tell that's designed to be difficult to prove.
Right.
Like, what are you going to...
You really think you're doing something here? Like, what is this that you're doing? So I will say, as of today, around 10 states in the U.S. have placed their own regulations on it. But 3 of those states seemed only to be concerned about how candidates in elections will be affected. So literally specifies to saying if it damages a candidate's campaign. 3 out of 10 are those. I was like, wait.
Wow.
Wait, what?
Let's all run for office.
Right. I guess that's the only way you're going to be protected. And do it every year, no matter what. Just to come in as like a write-in. And if you win, sorry.
Whoops.
And around 5 of them are specific to usage of sexual content, but it's more specific related to minors, which is necessary, yes. But I feel like, again, a victim is a victim is a victim.
Yeah.
So they had to put that under like, well, first let's care about the children.
Right.
Then we'll talk about everything else. Again, this is a bit confusing in general. And the others, when I looked it up, was just a generic conversation about like, don't do this, don't do that. But it really wasn't about, nobody talked about jail time. No one really talks about criminal charges. So there's no conversations, because we know that if you possess child porn, you should be on the sexual offender registry, which has its good and bads too, y'all. Like, that's a whole separate conversation that we can have. And I'm not saying that we don't need to tell people about sexual offenders. We definitely do. But this has been a power play and is a racist play that needs to be talked about as well, because people can come off of it really quickly if you have money. Anyway.
Yeah.
Oh, the system is corrupt. This system is corrupt. But AI is not helping in any least way. The fact that the first things that popped on my site was that, like, here, you have access to all this porn, was so deeply I just kind of sat there and stared at it.
Yeah.
And first, I was like, I done messed up. That was that moment. I was like, oh, I done messed up. Second, I was like, why? Why is this at the top of the search? Shouldn't it be like something else? Like, shouldn't it be like, yeah, this is a concern. And when you look it up, it does show the South Korean incident as the biggest headline, which I think is interesting as well, because we're so easy to like pinpoint other areas first when there's a huge issue here. Y'all, it's a lot.
It is. And we're definitely going to have to come back and revisit this, because technology is changing so quickly. And I do think, as Bridget always puts so well in her episodes she comes on and does with us, I think a lot of the victim blaming also comes back to you agreed on that thing, the contract, that you're going to use this product online, and therefore you basically have agreed to it. But it's not true. Like, the way that we live, you can't live without a lot of those things. You can't succeed without a lot of those things. And to say like a company is just kind of shrugging at you and your safety and the way that you exist online, I don't think is legit. I don't think that should be a thing. So yeah, we have a lot of conversations that we need to have about this, and we will. But in the meantime, listeners, if you have any thoughts on this, any stories or topics we need to cover, any resources, please let us know. You can email us at stephaniemomstuff@iheartmedia.com. You can find us on Twitter at momstuffpodcast, or on Instagram and TikTok as Steph Will Never Told You. You can find us on YouTube as well. And we have a TeePublic store, and we have a book you can get wherever you get your books. Thanks, as always, to our super producer, Christina, our executive producer, Maya, and our contributor, Joey.
Thank you.
And thanks to you for listening. Stuff I Never Told You is a production of iHeartRadio. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, you can check out the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.